And I commend the bill to the House.
I call Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First in the Building Amendment Bill number 4, third reading. And wasn't it interesting listening to the Minister's speech, Minister Maurice Williamson, defending the indefensible of the 1990s and the leaky building situation that we now have in this country. And where the Minister said, oh, nothing to do with us, nothing to do with the government, nothing to do with the Minister, that was Standards New Zealand. That was Standards New Zealand's problem, not ours. He omitted to mention that Standards New Zealand is a Crown entity. It is a Crown entity. It is autonomous, but it's still a Crown entity. It has 3 out of its 7 board members appointed by the Minister of Commerce. 3 of the 7 board members are ministerial appointments. It does have accountability. The current chair was announced by the Minister of Commerce, Simon Power, when he was a minister. And the Crown does have oversight of that entity in terms of what it sets. And certainly, Minister, back in the 1990s, under the National Watch, and sure, they may have inherited the Building Act review in 1991 from the former Labor government, but your government in the 1990s allowed it to continue to pass into law, which then saw, as a result of that, reduced standards in the 1990s, which then saw Standards New Zealand allowing reduced standards in the building code, which then saw materials such as kiln-dried timber and monolithic cladding being used, which then saw $30 billion of New Zealand property and rising ending up in leaky building situation. And the Minister then said, well, we should also just blame that on Carters and Fletchers, who convinced Standards New Zealand to allow the kiln-dried timber. Well, that's all very well, Minister, but what are you now doing about that situation? Because the Ministry of Education, which this year announced it has $1.5 billion worth of leaky schools throughout New Zealand, many hundreds of leaky schools throughout New Zealand, it has entered into a court case against James Hardie Industries on monolithic cladding throughout the New Zealand schools situation. But the Minister mentioned tonight about Carters and Fletchers providing the kiln-dried timber. Well, Minister, what are you doing about chasing Carters and Fletchers to get some payback on all that kiln-dried timber that now is also rotting in the schools of New Zealand, rotting in the hospitals of New Zealand, rotting in public buildings of New Zealand, rotting in defence and other ministry buildings in New Zealand, and rotting in the homes of good, average New Zealand Kiwis whose houses are rotting around them? What are you doing, Minister, about chasing the Carters? What are you doing, Mr Minister, chasing the likes of Carters and Fletchers, who you stated tonight were responsible for it? You're doing nothing. Oh, sorry, the Minister is doing nothing. The Minister is doing nothing. So it's all very well, Minister, to point the finger at Carters and Fletchers. Minister, please go and chase these people and hold them to account for the $30 to $40 to $50 billion perhaps it's going to end up in leaky buildings right across New Zealand's commercial, public and private sector. Now, carrying on with this particular bill and why New Zealand First is not supporting it. Mr Speaker, you can drive a bus through half of this. For instance, under the exemptions, it says here, demolition of a detached building is permitted. A complete demolition of a building that is detached, is not more than 3 stories, doesn't require a consent. You can just knock it down. Mr Speaker, one would ask, I wonder what, and the member for North Shore sitting over there might be asked this question in her electorate of the North Shore, but I wonder what the people in Devonport who have a particular affinity to heritage might be thinking when not that heritage. No, I'm thinking of younger heritage than that member. But what will the people of Devonport be thinking when, for instance, under this Act, demolition of a building is permitted under 3 stories with no problems at all. So basically in Devonport, a heritage building an outhouse or something, could be an old stables, could be a lovely historic building that currently must have a consent from the local authority to be demolished, could be pulled down. Now, you imagine the impact on heritage buildings throughout New Zealand as a result of that, where people can basically just say, oh, well, we don't need that particular building out there anymore, let's just pull it down. Under the current situation, if it has heritage value, it would be covered. And when you look at all the other exemptions, which include porches and verandas, carports, retaining walls, fences and hoardings, decks, platforms, bridges and boardwalks, not exceeding 1.5 metres, all sorts of things where there are structures. And again, you get back to situations, Mr Speaker, where we all remember what happened at Cave Creek with the collapse of that particular deck, and where it was shown in that very sad situation that inadequate skills have been used and materials used in terms of that particular deck construction. But in this situation where basically so many of these things, and this is including exemptions for alterations to non-residential buildings such as shops, offices, libraries, factories, warehouses, churches or schools. So schools are now also exempt from such building work because they are categorised alongside offices and libraries and other things. Again, do we have a situation where some alterations are done in a school and they say, well, this was a school, it didn't need a consent, didn't have to go to the local authority to check if it was permitted, and it's done, and then something happens in that school and they say, gosh, how on earth did the legislation go through that exempted schools from requiring consents in this order? 100 square metre marquees and tents will not require anything from any authority. They can be put up. 100 square metre marquee or tent. These are major structures. And I know, Mr Chairman, from having been involved in many community events, that some of these marquees are very, very significant. And when they are put up, and they're put up in often some perilous situations on sloping areas, for public events and all that sort of thing, they certainly do need and require the scrutiny of an independent authority at times to check that they've been constructed in the right manner. And are we going to have a situation, Mr Chair, again, where a large marquee, 100 square metre marquee, is put up just by any old Joe Bloggs without any independent authority checking that it's been put up adequately, and then we find a large number of people gathered at an event, whether it be a wedding function, whether it be some other gathering, public gathering, and then we find that the structure fails. Mr Speaker, this bill is all about providing loopholes and exemptions and lowering the standards in New Zealand. We do want to reduce costs in New Zealand, of course, to consumers. We do want to reduce expense to consumers and the public of New Zealand, but not at the expense of safety in those structures. And, Mr Speaker, it is very regretful that really, if this was properly independently analysed, this is opening up a huge can of worms for future potential risk to New Zealanders. It is opening up a situation where shonky jerry builders and under the fines can be fined, for instance, $2,000 if they do not, if they commit an offence in terms of their disclosure on the prescribed checklist, $2,000 fine, or if they commit offence under subsection 3, up to a $20,000 fine. Well, isn't that ridiculous? So these could be large constructions. They don't do it. They provide some sort of shonky-looking certificates that make out that they are legitimate. They're self-regulating. They're not controlled by any authority in terms of what they're doing, and then they're only subject to a $20,000 fine if they're caught out. Mr Speaker, again, this is opening up a situation of cowboy building in New Zealand, cowboy controls in New Zealand, self-regulation, where basically it'll be a free-for-all, and the national government will once again rue the day that in 2013 they brought this in, as they did the leaky homes in the 1990s, and it will be leaky homes and leaky buildings revisited.
Member, order. Order. Members, this bill is concluded. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The party votes called for. I ask the clerk for a party vote.
New Zealand National.
59 in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
33 votes opposed.
Green Party,
11 votes opposed.
New Zealand First,
7 votes opposed.
Maori Party,
2 in favour.
Mana,
1 vote opposed.
Act New
1
Zealand,
in favour.
United
1
Future,
in favour.
Brendan Horan.
1 vote opposed.
Any other votes?
Members, the ayes are 63, the noes are 53. The motion is agreed to.
Building Amendment Bill number 4, third reading.
Call on Government Order of the Day number 5.
Financial reporting